Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Akil, and for today's episode, we cover thinking styles. We go over what they are, as well as how they've helped organizations support people with specific purposes. Joining me today is Indi Young, who's an amazing researcher, really focused on giving back to the community when it comes to shifting the product strategy mindset. I'll put all the links to her socials in the description below, and with that being said, enjoy the episode. I'm doing a lot. I'm doing this podcast, but I'm also hosting conferences and speaking a lot more. I want to even speak more on conferences. And as a kid, I was never that kid that wanted to do presentations. I would always figure out some way for someone else to do it. Or even in a team setting, I would do all the work, but the presentation, that's up to someone else.
Exactly. I'll haul a little bit harder on my share of the work so that somebody else takes care of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know how it happened, but all of a sudden now I'm like, this is doable. And you get better and better at it to a point where you're actually comfortable.
Exactly. There. To that point where you're comfortable.
Yeah.
I think I remember the first presentation. I mean, I had given a couple of presentations, but they were, huge audience and hardly anybody in the room or whatever. It just didn't bother me. And I think I was co-presenting at one point. I don't remember those ones very well. They were before the turn of the century. But I remember the first one that I gave for Adaptive Path. And oh my gosh, sweaty hands. Yeah. I was shaking. I'm like, what the heck? This is a weird physical phenomenon. Yeah. And it never happened to me before again. It was just that one time.
You're very, very conscious though. If you're like, what is happening?
Yeah. Like, why are my hands sweaty?
Yeah. Like an out of body kind of thing.
Yeah. Very bizarre.
Yeah. I wonder how many people actually get to that point. I guess it's very, even though that idea and that kind of grandeur of the whole thing, that holds people back. And I think it's a shame because if people actually try, if they start with something, step by step, you will get to a point where it is comfortable and you can actually do it.
But, different things for different folks, right?
Yeah, that's true as well.
There might be that person just like you having somebody else on the team do the presentation and just leave it that way.
Yeah.
I used to attend a conference called SIGCHI, which is Special Interest Group in SIGGRAPH in graphics, computer graphics. So it was the very beginning. That was the place where we would have like one night where everybody would bring their little short reels and play their little animations. Nope. And there was some beautiful animations there was a professor in Japan who would do these really ethereal animations that were all just numeric, but it ended up looking like maybe dust storms or ionic storm, whatever's on Jupiter or Saturn, or maybe under the water or undersea. And so your camera is moving around, you're seeing these big things swirling and you're going around them. And it was just amazing. But we also saw the very first, do you remember on Pixar, they have that little Lumo, the light fixture
that stomps one of the letters,
bounces along. Saw the very first version of that. The very first one. At that conference. Cool. All sorts of neat things happening. But one of the things that also happened was that I saw people presenting and I thought to myself, I want to be up there. And I'm looking at myself going like, why do you want to be up there? You're the little introvert. You don't want to be up there. I'm like, I want to be up there. So somehow, if that grows inside of you, then absolutely, little by little, you can accomplish it.
Yeah. For me, the sad thing is I thought I could never do that, but I always admired people that were really good at that. Like, especially at university, people were at a level that they were like, man, first of all, their English is really good, which is also kind of a second language thing. And just the skills of presenting, storytelling, engaging with the audience. I saw little aspects of that and I was like, I could never be that person. But slowly but surely, hopefully, I'm getting to a point that I would admire, hopefully.
Yeah.
That's kind of
the thing. Exactly. We never give ourselves credit for where we are.
Yeah. What I notice is you never stand still, or I never stand still and first of all celebrate the little milestones. or reflect on how far you've actually gotten.
Yeah, we're always like future thinking,
yeah,
which you're not supposed to do in Buddhism. You're supposed to be in the moment, but we're always like, well, I could be better. I could do this, or you were backwards thinking, I should have said that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that kind of present mindedness. That's a difficult word.
Yeah. My neighbor here is a Buddhist meditation teacher.
Yeah.
So I've absorbed a little bit of it, just like living next door to her for 15 years.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
So I invited you on to talk about thinking styles. And I did a little research and here and there I have some thoughts. But let's start with kind of the definition of thinking styles. What are they in the first place? Or how would you explain them to someone?
Yeah. I actually don't care what word we use. So you could use the word persona, or you could use the word archetype.
Yeah.
But a thinking style is one of those. It is a representation of a group of people that you get from data. But the thing that's different about thinking styles is that they are not described using demographics. They are not described using a role or a title. They're not described using, like typical behavior or average user behavior or anything like that. They are described based on their philosophic approach to their purpose. So you define one purpose, you do your research study around that purpose, what went through your mind as you were addressing this purpose in the past. You get interior cognition. And the thinking styles that come out of that are representations of differences in that interior cognition, differences in that approach. Yeah. So this there's an asterisk there, because after a little bit, I do add in the demographics again, and there's a certain reason to do that, which we can talk about again later. But I'll tell you the reason right now, and then I'll get into some examples. But the reason is interior cognition is usually not caused by demographics. It's usually not caused by the fact that you are 6'2". It's not caused by the fact that you have difficulty hearing. But yes, actually it is sometimes caused that way. It's not caused by the color of your skin, but yes, sometimes it is caused by the color of your skin in situations where you feel you're being discriminated against or being made unwelcome. In situations where someone's bias is sort of like, punching you in the face. And I can give you some examples of that. So in those cases, I add the demographics back on and make lenses. So, your underlying thinking style is not driven by your demographics. So you have a thinking style, but you also have this lens that you use. When your interior cognition is triggered by something in the environment in reaction to your demographics, your physiology, your inability to necessarily get down the stairs very well, all of that sort of thing. Okay. So
it sounds a lot like kind of nature versus nurture to me, in ways that you have a certain, like you come from a certain DNA, I guess. My parents are my parents, and I have brothers and sisters, and somehow we're similar. But also my upbringing was different. Like I grew up in a different age than my siblings. Therefore, my thoughts are a bit different. The environment has shaped me to think in a certain way as well.
Okay, so no.
No?
No, because that's personality.
Okay.
This is very specifically about a purpose.
All right.
So if your purpose was to, like, I'm a developer, I'm using this new SDK, and there's something in it that isn't making sense, and I have to figure this out. It feels like maybe it could be a bug or maybe not, and so I'm trying to figure out how to do it. There's 3 different thinking styles there.
Okay.
In the study that we did. One of the thinking styles is like, hey, I'm going to sort of like connect with my crowd and see what other people know or what they've experienced. There's one that is, hey, I'm a master at this. I know I can figure it out. I'm just going to put my head down and figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. And there's another one. But I want to call your attention to the fact that all of them actually had something in common. And that is, I'm going to give my answer back out to other people.
Okay.
Or I've got, I'm done with whatever I checked in this, piece in the library, and I've got 5 minutes before my meeting. I'm going to dash into this, Stack Overflow or something and see if I can answer some questions. That was true of every thinking style. And so it isn't a part of the thinking style. The thinking styles are the differences in the approach. So the person who's, I'm an expert, I'm going to put my head down, I can get this done, it has a very different approach than the person who's like, hey, I'm going to reach out to everybody around me. It might just be my team. It might be online. It might be going to meetups and seeing what other people are doing with this particular SDK. Right? So there's different approaches. Those are two very different approaches to the same purpose.
Interesting. But the same person can do both things, can't they? Because I might try and figure things out myself and then be like, okay, let's switch gears, ask my colleagues, ask my team.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's the other part. The other part of the definition of a thinking style is that it is easily switched.
Okay.
Now, it sometimes might switch based on context. And I've got all sorts of examples that I can talk about.
Yeah.
Or it might switch based on life events.
Okay.
So you might have one thinking style toward a purpose, like maybe the purpose is to always be taking, educating yourself, maybe be taking a course, maybe be hanging out with people who are educated. But then you have a child and you don't necessarily have room for that in your life anymore. And so your thinking style about always growing is now funneled at your child.
Yeah.
Or funneled through your child.
Yeah. I get how it then also is different from personality, because it takes a longer time to switch your personality.
Yes, it does. And I actually did a study about personal identity change, and there were 3 thinking styles that came out of that.
Yeah. What were those? Okay. Or how would you describe those?
So those 3 thinking styles, and sometimes I have to reference notes because it's hard to keep all of these from all of my clients for the past 25 years. I can imagine, but for the personal identity change, what we wanted to do was understand the question, the goal that we had, which is not the person's purpose. The goal we had was we wanted to understand how people develop self-confidence.
Yeah.
Okay. The purpose we chose was, how did you enact a personal identity change? Not how are you enacting, but how did you enact? And we're doing certain kind of recruiting so that we make sure we are listening to people who have had a lot of thinking about this.
Yeah.
And so the thinking styles that came out of that, one of them was, I've seen a lot of other people in that personality. Yeah. They've made that change. I know it's possible. I'm going to study how they did it. I'm going to figure out how to make adapt it to my own situation. And I'm going to sort of like jump into that, process or that current or something and go. I think we called it jump into the current. Okay. There was another one where people are like, nobody's done this.
Yeah.
This is it's unique to me. It's a different thing.
Yeah.
And I have to figure out everything about it from scratch. And so I'm going to look at other analogous ways that people have learned how to get themselves through something. And I'm like one woman looked at the booklets that Marines are learning from in terms of sort of focus. And she was reaching out to some various, friends like that to help her through this kind of a change. Yeah. But also studying, like, what I need to do this. How do I do it? for her change, she needed some medication.
Yeah.
And, how do you find that? Does that even exist? Oh my gosh, she's hearing little stories like you could do this and there is a medication that can help you do that. And so she's trying to chase it down, right? Nowadays, that personal identity change that she made is much more common.
Okay.
And so somebody wanting to do that is probably going to be in the thinking style of jump in the current.
Yeah.
Okay. And these are representations of several people. The third one in that was actually a really difficult one. And that is, we named it Escape and Explore.
Okay.
And it was a difficult one because the people who we were listening to were really, they had interesting, brusque, accusatory kind of stances.
Accusatory?
In a way, yeah.
Okay.
And they had been, some of them had been through, a lot of discriminatory situations and they wanted out of it. Others hadn't.
Yeah.
And so we're like, where is this coming from? What is this? And it turns out that their approach was like, hey, first of all, I've got to get out of this situation. I just have to cut the ties and get out of this. So that's the escape part. And the other part is like, I don't know what I want to be. I don't know how I want to be. And so I'm gonna travel. They all traveled.
Really explore.
Yeah, really explore. Live in other cultures.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. And then they took pieces of other cultures to build themselves a new identity.
Wow, that's very interesting. How do you define a thinking stance? Because you said you start with recruiting people that are kind of similar in their situation, and then you look at some sort of data, I guess, but that is not demographics. What data would that be then? Because it's very qualitative. It feels like a lot of information.
It is very qualitative. And we want, it's a human, humans are complex.
Yeah.
And we want that complexity to shine.
Okay.
We want to understand what all those weird complexities are.
Yeah.
And if we did that without framing it by a person's purpose, we would not be able to see any patterns. We would just have the chaos.
Yeah.
We would have the complexity, right? And it would be really hard to get anything useful out of it. So that's why it's very important to frame by what I call the purpose. Now, the purpose sounds lofty, like, oh, my purpose in life. And it's not that. It's really, it's a goal, it's an aim, it's an intent, it's a thing somebody wants to get done, or a thing that they're procrastinating and don't want to have happen, or something that they've just started thinking about and they've been thinking about it for a while, and it's like, I'm just in the thinking stages. But so I used to call it intent, but intent sounded too intense.
It does, yeah.
Goal sounds like too, like there's an end state and then I'll be done.
Like a journey.
And often these are things that people are doing all the time and won't ever stop doing.
Continuously,
Or sometimes it's something like raising a kid, and that's a long-term thing. And you stop kind of doing it kind of in pieces.
Yeah, but never really.
Over the decades. Yeah. Some of it is like, changing my career. I know a lot of people who have been through a career change. Think to yourself of your own career change and how many months or years that took. Yes, at some point you were done. But it isn't the kind of thing where you're like, oh, okay, all I need to do is order dinner tonight and get it delivered.
Yeah.
That too is a purpose. That too is something that we study. So if we didn't frame it by a purpose, then we would get people talking about all sorts of different things. And with qualitative data, it's only useful if patterns come out, right? So many stakeholders have distrust of qualitative data because they have encountered chaotic qualitative data.
Yeah, goes all over the place.
Yeah, all over the place. And so the researchers will give them anecdotes.
Okay.
So that is like little representative stories here and there, and it's useless.
They're like blanks. You're shooting with blanks.
I think actually what you're doing is you're shooting with just one type of bullet that doesn't represent any other types of bullets.
Okay.
If you prefer to have some sort of a gun analogy here in your show.
Sure.
I'm just going with it, Patrick.
yeah, no worries. Whatever pops in my head, that's usually what comes out.
Yeah, I live in the country where you don't know if you're going to die when you go to elementary school or to the grocery store. So I don't tend to talk about guns.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
That's fine. It's just the idea of framing by a purpose is only about getting valid data so that you can give your stakeholders something that's actually usable.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you frame by a purpose, that gives you the opportunity to hear from many people about their interior cognition as they addressed the same purpose, the same thing.
Yeah.
So for example, I did a series of 8 studies in a row for an airline. Okay. And with the airline, the first couple of studies were decide to take a trip. That was the purpose. There's a lot that goes into deciding to take a trip.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The next couple of studies were get to the gate on time for my flight.
Okay.
And I think we added on to that one and board the flight, but we might have done a couple of them where like I think actually, because this was so long ago, I think actually we did get to the gate on time, and then separately we did the purpose of like board the plane and be in that plane and get to my destination.
Yeah.
Okay. And then with all of those, we managed to see patterns and even a little overlap between those purposes. So we ended up putting them all into one opportunity map.
Interesting.
Sometimes purposes don't have any overlap, and so we put them in separate opportunity maps.
Okay.
But the idea is that when we collect this data, we are looking for interior cognition. I've said that a couple of times. And interior cognition is defined as someone's inner thinking, kind of their inner voice, their workarounds, their hesitations, their motivations, kind of what's running through their mind, what's running through their heart goes into that as well. So their emotional reactions, I call them emotional reactions, or sometimes just reactions, depending on the client and how sensitive they are to the word emotion.
Yeah.
And also the third thing is guiding principles.
Interesting. And
guiding principles are not values. They are little personal rules that you use to make decisions.
Yeah.
So with the airline thing, you might have a guiding principle of leave things cleaner than they were before. And you apply that when you go camping, but you also apply that when you're sitting at the gate.
Interesting.
In an airport, right?
Yeah.
So there's a little guiding principle for you, and you'll hear some of these things. Now, these are the basic units that we're looking for.
Yeah.
And when we're creating a thinking style, so we're creating an opportunity map one way, we're creating the thinking style with the same data in another way. And what we're looking for is, of the whole set of interior cognition of an individual, how does that compare to another individual?
Yeah.
Okay. And we're trying to throw out the universal things. So I mentioned before that universally in that study about developers trying to figure out what's wrong with this SDK, they all were taking time to give answers.
Okay.
Share answers with other people. Give back to the community is what we called it.
Yeah.
And that is a universal. So we're tossing that out. That doesn't belong in a thinking style.
Interesting.
Right. It belongs in the opportunity map, and all the thinking styles do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got it captured, but the thinking styles only contain the interior cognition that's very different between different people in the study.
Yeah. So not necessarily the output or the results of those different thoughts or those different kind of ways of going for that goal, I guess.
What do you
trying
mean
to achieve
output? That? Oh, okay. Different ways of going for that goal. All we're not interested in explanations how people do things.
Yeah.
We're not interested in opinions or preferences. That's exterior layers.
Okay.
They're valid for other types of research, such as market research.
Yeah.
And this is another place where our qualitative data gets distrusted because stakeholders are only used to seeing qualitative data as market data, market research. And with market research, you're looking for preferences, opinions, beliefs. Is it behaviors? I assume remember. So. Yeah, exactly. And attitudes. So you're looking for those four things. And so that creeps into the way that researchers are trying to do research for product strategy.
Okay.
And it's misguided because what market research is about is a person's relationship to a brand.
Interesting.
Or person's relationship to a person. Okay. Like if the person is a brand, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What we're after is trying to understand how somebody addresses their purpose so that we can support it better.
Yeah.
That is very different than the question of what is this person's relationship to the brand and how do we improve it.
Interesting. So it's just a general purpose that you're looking for. And I like that you say you look at past data, right? Not necessarily their thoughts on how they think they would handle it. Because I always, when someone asks, how would you handle this problem? I explain it to them. But then in my head, I'm always like, would I actually do this? Or have I actually done that? Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. That's called future thinking.
Yeah. Exactly.
I have chapters about this in the new book, which is we're getting the proof of the book either today or tomorrow from the printer. Nice. So it should be out like really, really soon.
Yeah, would love to check it out.
Yeah, very excited about that. But I do explain that future thinking is not helpful to the question. I mean, future thinking might be helpful with the question about your relationship to the brand, but it's not useful for the question of how are you successfully doing or accomplishing that purpose that you're doing or making progress on that purpose or putting off that purpose, right?
Yeah.
How are you doing that successfully? And how can we support you better? And the question in there is, how can we understand different ways of thinking that we did not realize existed and does not get supported with the services that we're providing?
Exactly. It feels like you're going from a more kind of generic user-centric focus to an actual realistic human-centered focus.
Humans, plural, yes. Yeah, so that's the whole point of having thinking styles is so that you get away from the average user. The average user does not exist. The average user represents some fictional thing that your organization or your team has come to a conclusion about, which is maybe true for that team.
Okay.
Or that organization, or the very small number of friends that they know who do this, or if they have actually gone and done research that isn't market research, then they're on the right track. And they're starting to see that there are different approaches out there. Because the whole point is to stop making people feel unwelcome. The whole point is to start supporting people. Start helping someone who, maybe doesn't ever want to be up on stage, and support them in that purpose of never being up on stage, right? Yeah. They didn't have that seed grow in them. And it's a valid way of being in the world. Now we have to figure out what the purpose is. The purpose is probably communicating some information to a group, right?
Exactly.
Or maybe not communicating information, but persuading, that can be another purpose for it. There can be a bunch of different purposes that you can study and start to see, we could actually help you do that purpose without forcing you to get up on a stage.
Yeah. How do you figure out, so when you've defined your kind of thinking styles, how do you then define how you would help those with that thinking style?
Yeah. So let's use a new set of examples. And that would be from I've got to bring it up on the page here, but that would be from the airline. So there were, out of those 8 studies that we did, we ended up in the very first study with a set of 5 thinking styles. We're like, okay, these are the draft versions of the thinking styles. Let's see how that works out. And the next thing actually corroborated 4 of them, the next study. And then the next study corroborated them again. So we're seeing these patterns come up again and again, even though our study purpose is shifting. Our study purpose was decide to take a trip versus get to the gate on time and get in on board and take the flight. So it was shifting, but these thinking styles were staying the same. It was like, whoa, we actually did 100 listening sessions over the course of those 8 studies. And so the thinking styles that came out of that were these 4. And so let me kind of bring them up so I can talk about them more specifically. So the one is this idea that, if we're going to take this flight, there are some rules, and if I follow the rules, it'll go smoothly.
Okay.
And if you follow the rules, it'll go smoothly. If you follow the rules, it'll go smoothly. If you follow the rules, it'll go smoothly. Yeah. So, when people are not following the rules, it's not going very smoothly and I get kind of frustrated. Or maybe the staff isn't helping or following the rules that I think are in place. Yep. And I maybe, get anxious about that, or might even show my frustration when other people aren't doing, the things that are necessary to make it smooth for us all to sort of work together. When we first discovered this thinking style, the team at the airline wanted to call it the grumbler.
Grumbler?
Yeah, because they're the ones who are like, oh, you should blah, blah, blah. How come you're not? And trying to, make people do things right. Yeah. And I'm like, you cannot call someone a name they would not call themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's antagonistic. Shall we use that word again? So we called it something, I think we called it the frustrated, because that was the word that kept coming out. Later, as I polish these things, because I keep using them over and over again, I'm calling it let's do this correctly.
I like that.
Right? Because that's the point. So the second thinking style that came out of all of that data was someone who's like, hey, you know what? We're taking a flight and we are not in control. Okay. So let's try to make the best of things. Let's create a positive environment. Yeah. Okay. So it's sort of the same as the let's do this correctly, but it's not like let's all follow the rules. It's let's, do what it takes in various contexts to try to make it better for everybody. And so I'm going to go out of my way actually to help other people. Yeah. I'm going to notice like if the gate agent looks really tired and bring them a coffee or a snack to help them through this long line of people who got their flight canceled or something. I'm going to go out of my way to help this mother who's got, the 3 toddlers sitting here for like 2 hours longer than expected. So it's the kind of way of making a positive impact on the whole situation, the whole experience. Yeah. So that one was called Positive Experience for Everyone.
I like that.
Yeah.
Very nice.
And remember, there's 2 more. From flight to flight, you might change thinking styles.
Yeah, because I recognize myself in at least the two of them that you already mentioned, but just different time, different place. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So the third one is a person who needs their flight to be stress-free. It might be because they have anxiety about flying, or anxiety about being in an enclosed space, or being around crowds, or it might be because the rest of their life is so stressed out that this is their one place to hide from everybody.
Yeah.
We heard people calling it my cocoon in the sky.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's just, some people were calling it also, it's a bus in the sky. So it's not like, the flight is not a big deal. It's just a thing I have to endure, and I'm going to wrap myself in this little cocoon, right? Yeah. I'm going to try to prepare every detail so that inside my cocoon, everything is good.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to be distracted from something, maybe distracted from my anxieties, or maybe just de-stress from the rest of my world or something. And the other thing that was really key to this thinking style is to avoid disturbing others.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is the one that we called in the bubble.
Okay.
Originally we called it the, it was the Zen master or something like that. I can't remember. Oh, shoot. I forget the original. But anyway, I've been polishing these and it's very fun. The fourth one is someone who is trying to fit the flight into a very packed schedule or a productive day. And they want to be productive. They want their time to be used in the best way possible. Now, this could have, the business traveler in mind, but it could also be the person who's like, well, I'm going to use this time to finish knitting the sweater for my niece, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Who's 3 or something. It can be anything that they're using their time wisely for. But when it comes to delays, they are actively looking for a quicker way.
Okay.
So they want to keep moving, or they want to keep productive. And so they're always doing this kind of calculus of like, well, what are the other options out there? How do they balance out? Snowstorm, could I actually drive a car through it, or should I really wait
exactly
and take the hotel room that they're offering and be productive there, that kind of thing. So that's the fourth one. We called it use my time wisely. And you can see throughout all of those, from let's do this correctly, the rules, and make it smooth, versus the positive experience for everyone, versus in the bubble, wrap myself in the cocoon, versus use my time wisely. You can see yourself maybe having switched between those in your own flights.
I really can. It's very interesting because that's not a conscious thing, right? For example, there was one time where I wanted to follow the rules, and it's because someone put their seat down and it was in front of me. And I was going to work, and then I was like, well, actually, sorry, I can't work like this. And we ended up making a scene. They ended up yelling at me, you should have gone to first class. And I actually called the flight attendant, and I was like, how is this going to work? And apparently it was in the rules that he could do that. So I could do nothing. And then I was like, okay. That's a losing battle.
Yeah, that is a losing battle. And that was definitely not a person who was a positive experience for everyone type of person. Nor an in the bubble person, because the in the bubble person doesn't want to disturb others.
But then
what positive person experience were they? For everyone would have like, oh, well, what if I put it back part way so you could, at least get some room.
But then if I heard the thinking styles, for example, if we take that person in specific, what person were they? Because they don't really fit into any of those.
Probably, actually, this is on board the flight. Yeah. They could have been a person who was use my time wisely. Okay. And part of that, I was talking about productive, but maybe they need to be productive for a meeting and they need to catch some sleep.
Interesting. That is what they said. They wanted to do a quick nap.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So do you think so everyone on an airplane has kind of a thinking stance that aligns with the ones that you found? Do you think?
So far, we've shopped it around for a lot of time. And pretty much, yes, we've seen this happening.
Yeah.
True. It may not be, we only talked to 100 people.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to do.
That's a huge qualitative study, but there could be other thinking styles out there. The fifth one that we found in the first study was really specific to that purpose, which was decide whether to take a flight, and that was somebody who was deciding on behalf of someone else.
Yeah.
It didn't extend to getting to the gate or being on board. But the whole question is like, why make thinking styles?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is to create different experiences to support different thinking styles. And so you're starting to see some of this happen in airports, in the get to the gate. With respect to the use my time wisely, there are more commonly these raised desks where you can plug in.
I've seen
and and kind of like put your earbuds in and get some work done. Or maybe even take a call. There's another place where you can do a call with somebody so you aren't disturbing the people around you. And that might be sort of a in the bubble type person, or it could be a use my time wisely kind of person. But we're starting to see a little bit of this. We have not seen any support yet for the let's do this correctly. Nor have we seen any support for the positive experience for everyone, because those are the thinking styles that are so different than what the airlines are used to thinking about. What the airlines are used to thinking about is like, hey, our biggest market is the business traveler. We call them the road warrior. It's, this one type of thinking approach. And we're only going to support that person. We're going to put our resources into that person because that's where the money's coming from.
Interesting.
And that's where it has been. And I think over the past decade, we're starting to see a little bit more diversity of support for different people's approaches.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because if you're in kind of a diverse group, right, you don't fit into that working category that travels and that needs everything. You're like, oh, we have all these things here, but you just walk past them and you go about your day because you need to catch your flight.
Right.
And if you do actually need them, then you do use them and you're like, oh, this is handy.
Yeah.
But for the other way around, there is nothing to support you in that way then.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you can imagine all sorts of different types of support coming out there. With positive experience for everyone, there can be all sorts of even incentives to help people become a spreader of a positive experience.
Yeah.
So there's there's a future here if people will use this. The story with this was that this airline merged, and so this research was it was used. The thinking styles were used for a while, but I think most of the team is gone now. And I actually spoke to somebody who was working at that airline, the new merged airline presently, and she's all, we really need to do this for our flight attendants and for our gate agents. We really need to understand what their thinking styles are, because this was about passengers, right?
Exactly.
And I'm like, oh, well, you've got the passenger thinking style. She's like, we do? So
that must have been nice.
sent her all the data again.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Do you think people have kind of a predisposition thinking style? Because if you were to ask me kind of that future thinking, what do you think you would do? I already have kind of a thought how I would approach things, but then based on scenarios and based on what actually happens, I might switch.
Okay, you're going to have to ask me that question again. I would never ask somebody about their future thinking. That's market research.
Yeah. But so, for example, when you said, okay, Cocoon, I could see when I did that. It was when I traveled every other week because I had a girlfriend. She was in London. I needed to travel from Amsterdam to London. It felt very transactional. It was like catching a bus, right? So I knew going into that, I was going to be in my cocoon. It was very obvious that I was going to do that. I knew that going into my flight, for example. I knew that I was going to do that. Not necessarily looking at past events. If something took me out of that, I tried to stay in my bubble, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I felt like I had something predispositions there.
Yeah. When we're not trying to ask people, hey, what thinking style are you?
I get that. Yeah.
Right. We're trying to discover patterns so that we can understand what thinking styles are and start providing support. And people have agency to choose which kind of support works for them.
Yeah.
Okay. This can be true in all sorts of different situations. So for the confidence building that I talked about, those 3 thinking styles, we would probably only focus on one of those thinking styles at first.
Yeah.
Helping somebody build confidence. And then we might move to start supporting another thinking style, helping somebody build confidence. Yeah. With respect to the software developers wrestling with the SDK, if we were the authors of that SDK, we would want to make sure that we're providing avenues for all of 3 of those different thinking styles to solve that problem.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting, because if you have a service, if you're providing a service and people switch thinking styles even though they don't know they're doing it, and you help them in whatever thinking style they have, then it feels like you have the best service.
Yeah, exactly. And it may not be even your service. So this is another really important point to consider, is that oftentimes an org will only think in terms of their own services.
Yeah.
And yet there are all sorts of other ways that somebody accomplishes their purpose.
Yeah.
So that person doing the SDK might reach out to the meetup, might do Stack Overflow, might walk down the hallway and talk to their neighbor, might, email somebody that they worked with 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? All of those are avenues. And all of those avenues can have residents or as suggestions in the help files for that SDK or whatever they're doing to help support people.
Yeah.
Right? So to be able to look outside of just your own and not have to reproduce things in kind of a not so great, not as high quality as other things that exist out there, is an amount of hubris that is unnecessary. It's a waste of money for an organization to think that they could replicate StackFlow for their own SDK, right? And have everybody come there and have the power of the huge crowds of people who are participating.
Yeah, right? Interesting. It is such a different way of thinking about users feels weird. It's actually humans that are using whatever you're providing, right?
Right.
Because what I've seen is personas and is quantitative data, and I already have been in teams that don't really like personas because they, how do you say that? They don't cover enough humans, they don't cover enough people, and they make our scope very narrow, and then we don't think about other people, right? And you don't want that within your solution because then you're going to have even worse results. But still, you need to figure out how people are using whatever you're providing. And quantitative somehow doesn't cut it, right? Because first of all, the way you measure it is already going to be biased. Not everyone is going to provide that data. Not everyone is going to be covered within that data. So the only way to do it is to actually go to the people that use it, and figure out how they've used it in the past, right? Not their thoughts on how they think they're going to use it, but actual...
Not use it, but accomplish the purpose.
Exactly. Would experience cover it? Experience it?
Nope. Mm-mm.
Also not.
No, it has nothing to do with your solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even,
but
see,
yes,
even that thinking.
You're right up until that choice of words.
Yeah, exactly. But because that's how my mind interprets it, right? It is, for me as a person, I feel like I am experiencing it. But you're right. I always have a goal in mind, whatever that may be. And I require things of my outside environment to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So I've got this in the course I teach on thinking styles, this little way of testing personas. And one of the things that happens quite frequently with personas that I get presented is that they're actually all the same thinking style with different demographics pasted on top of them.
Yeah.
To try to represent like, oh, here's the market, the way the market divides up or something. Yeah. And the market and the market divisions are fine for marketing. But developing a relationship with a brand, which is what you're doing when you're marketing, is not trying to understand somebody as they accomplished or addressed their purpose and being able to support that better and support different thinking styles in addressing that purpose.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the support is going to be your solution. And at the point where you're working with your ideas and your solutions and, coming up with prototypes, then you're in the solution space and you can refer to them as a user then.
Yeah.
But not when you're trying to understand what their interior cognition is. Because at that point, they're just a human. They're a person. They're trying to address a purpose.
Yeah. And I think that's where I feel, I'm a software engineer on the day-to-day. And we are in solution mode, right? And that's where I feel kind of confronted with it, that there is sometimes a lack of actual understanding. Yet we do try and figure out a solution for a user, which is a persona, which is kind of an artificial thing that we've cultivated based on the data that we have.
Yeah. So one of the things that's really, that I hear some developers say is just tell me what to code. Because they've given up in a way. I think there is a passion, especially when you start out, trying to make things better, trying to support somebody, trying to make something that's going to really help somebody out with their purpose. And somehow along the way, when you get in a job and you're on a team and you're doing, this methodology or that methodology, your hands get tired and you don't get to do that anymore. And so there's a point at which a lot of people just give up. It's like, okay, fine. That part of it is gone for me. Now I'll just be a code monkey. But for some people, that passion still burns in there and they have not given it up. For some people, maybe they've just banked it and they can, uncover it and let it blossom again, because it is really possible. And one of the things that's fabulous about using an opportunity map, which it looks like a city skyline with a lot of towers in it, and each window in the tower is a summary of a quote from a person. And it's either inner thinking or emotional reaction or guiding principle. Emergent patterns come. This is from the bottom up, and that is a fundamentally computer science concept, right? It's also, complex systems. I think as a computer scientist, we are complex systems thinkers.
Yeah.
So this bottom up, trying to let the data say what it has to say. This is synthesis. It's not analysis. That is native to the way a developer thinks, or should be, if they I shouldn't use the word should, but it is probably. There are probably other ways of learning how to code where that may not have been part of the roots. But it was part of the roots when I was trained as a computer scientist. So having an emergent system that allows you to see all the parts of it and then layer on the thinking styles and then compare your solutions to each of those towers, to each of the thinking styles and each of the windows in there, and give yourself a metric, like a measurement of like, how well are we doing? Are we supporting them or are we harming them?
Yeah.
And I've defined 4 different layers of harm, only one of which we normally pay attention to, which is mild harm, which is like frustrating and confusing. But the more serious is like self-doubt or feeling unwelcome. And it goes worse from there.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But having that, and not only that, being able to put your hands around just one part of it and focus on it. And the part of it is the towers, which is the way somebody has been thinking as they addressed that purpose. So with the airline thing, with the getting to the airport, there were several blocks of towers in that mental model, such as, like decide how to get to the airport or figure out how to get to the airport. There was another one which was deal with delay getting to the airport.
Yeah.
Right? There was the whole thing about getting through security and preparing for that. There was also even packing and preparing for things in packing. So there's all sorts of different sections, and you might, even your stakeholders might just want to zero in on one of them. You cannot take the whole thing.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You zero in on like 3 towers or 5 towers at a time. You may have a couple of different places you want to zero in on, and you get the stakeholders to prioritize. Which one are we going to zero in on right now?
Yeah.
Okay, now we're zeroed in on this. We've got the thinking styles, we've got the data in those towers, but we also have other data that we can layer on here if it was defined by a purpose. So we could take evaluative data if it was defined by that purpose of those towers and layer it on here and look at our scores in terms of how well we are supporting people.
Yeah.
We can also bring other data from the outside world in here if it was about that purpose. We can bring trends and competition information in here if it is about that purpose. Just the act of aligning your solutions beneath the towers forces you to actually break your solutions apart according to the way a person is addressing their purpose. And that in of itself causes a ton of gaps that you're like, oh, haha, okay, we didn't realize this, or we realized it, but we didn't recognize it as something that we could work on.
Exactly. What I feel like I get is a very narrow lens of how reality actually works, of our piece in the puzzle, our solution, our service that we're providing, for example, versus the purpose of the people using it, right? I think we're only getting a niche of it usually.
What you get is, instead of a roadmap, you have a whole matrix. You have a whole landscape of different thinking styles approaching this purpose and this subset of the purpose. And you get to measure how well your organization is doing in support of helping, like what is the success rate of someone accomplishing that part of the purpose in this little section? Yeah. Using your tool versus using, Stack Overflow or, whatever, right? Yeah. So the idea is to break it into a matrix and conquer the different cells. I mean, not conquer, but make progress on. And you will make progress on one of those little cells, one of those little combinations, one of the, things that you put your arms around for, a quarter, for a month, I don't know, whatever. And you might come back to it again later. Yeah. You get to measure whether you're helping the person get success, one thinking style, versus measure how well you're helping another thinking style be successful in addressing their purpose within that little section. Yeah. And so with this respect, you will get a sort of a replacement for the roadmap. It's more an opportunity map or a landscape, I like to call it, because it contains more than what your app does or what your service does. Yeah. And it contains more thinking styles than what you're used to with that average user idea.
Yeah.
And therefore there's a heck of a lot in like very specific, you can put the lenses in there. Remember I talked about the demographic lenses?
Yeah.
So one thing that we did recently was about getting funding for a startup, especially for some reason, when you say startup, the funding has to come from venture capital. But when you say small business, it means you can go to the bank and get a loan. Yeah. I don't know why
It's weird how that works.
I'm not sure why that's true. But so we were talking about startups, and there were a lot of people that we listened to who encountered feelings of being not welcome.
Okay.
Like
in
one
the startup space or?
Well, here's an example. One person was going to give a pitch, and she's standing at the back of the room, just trying to breathe, getting ready to give her pitch. Somebody else is up there pitching, and somebody else at the back of the room turns to her and says, "Oh, you know what? We're out of pineapple juice. Could you go get more?"
That's horrible.
Yeah. And it's just like utterly broke her. For that. So that's just one example. And so what we did was we took that lens and layered it on the opportunity map. One of the well, I don't know if I can get into the outcomes there because they belong to that venture capital firm. But here, I'll say an umbrella thing about all venture capital, or most venture capital works on a network basis. So the only way you get in front of these people is if you know someone who knows someone who knows someone.
Yeah.
And venture capital firms could do better at actually actively reaching out into different arenas to find people that they could support.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Really including those as well.
Yeah. When one of the things that I like to talk about too, with this word inclusion, we get a sense that it means, we have to be more guarded in the way that we let our assumptions get away from us. And our bias get away from us. And that's true. That's part of it. You get diversity and inclusion training, and then everybody comes out of it feeling really ashamed. And I'm not sure. Those are the bad ones. I know some people who do that, and it comes out where people are feeling more connected. But it's hit or miss, right? Yeah. When I talk about inclusivity, when I talk about inclusion, what I mean is that more people can successfully accomplish their purpose. We're making it possible and more welcoming, or more comfortable for them to do it, and so more people are going to do it. This happened 2 other times in our history that I can point to easily. One was with universal design in built environment and accommodations for people with different learning approaches. We decided that average was not working, and so we made different approaches. So that's where you get the curb cuts in the city, and on and on and on. It's not perfect and it's not widespread yet, but that's one of them. The other one was adjustable seats. Apparently seats were not adjustable, and the place where they came from in the beginning was fighter jets. Back after the World War II, a lot of fighter jet pilots were crashing, and somebody figured out it was because the cockpit was designed for a size that nobody was. It was the numeric average size. And nobody was that size. So they're all like, okay, how do we solve for this? And one of the solutions was adjustable seats and adjustable yokes and things like that. Now we've got adjustable seats in our lives. So more people are comfortable doing it. So therefore, more people can do it, and more people do it.
Exactly.
Right? And more people can be in the world and feel welcome in the world and contribute to the world, or be productive, or be happy, or, whatever the thing is that you're after in terms of supporting.
Yeah, I have way too many thoughts in my head. I mean, we talked about goals and how you define and how you would structure those, but I think we're slowly running out of time.
Yeah.
So as a last one, have organizations actually put this to practice, the thinking styles, and in what way, kind of supporting quantitative data with the qualitative, or how have they done that? And what are the results there?
I gave you the example of the airports, right? And that's one way that you can see more visibly people doing that. In respect to insurance, I've done a lot of work with insurance companies, or heard about a lot of work that they're doing within insurance companies. I actually happen to have a mental model diagram generator, by the way, on my website, because the insurance companies who had their own, somebody had built one, right? It takes all of this data. We have like 7,000 pages or lines of data. And it spits out that the upper part of the opportunity map. The airline had one. Another insurance company had one. A bank had one, but none of their lawyers would let me release, have a copy of it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So I had to hire somebody to write one for me, because I have not developed anything in so long that I don't know how to use the development systems now.
Yeah, no worries. I love the honesty.
Exactly. But anyway, the idea in the insurance company was that there are, I'll just narrow it down to one part, right? Which was, you have an auto accident. Okay. And part of the opportunity map is like, okay, how do I handle an accident? What goes through your mind? And there's a whole section about like, make sure nobody else was hurt. Make sure I'm not to blame, right? Get information from the other person, or exchange information, that kind of thing. So there were all these different things. And then the thinking styles layered on top of it. One of them was sort of like, I am right. And I'm going to make this right. And I'm like going to be a little bit more out there doing it. Whereas there was another one that was kind of the opposite. It's like, oh no, this happened to me. Oh no, I'm having huge amounts of emotion or anxiety over it. So one of the things that one of the insurance companies rolled out was a phone number that you can call, get an agent if you're anxious, and have the agent not only talk to you, but you can have the agent talk to the other person, so you don't have to confront that person. Or you just, snap a photo of their license plate, and the agent can then look up that stuff and say, okay, this is that person, this is that person. Maybe that other person is being taken away on a stretcher and you can't talk to that person, right? And
exactly,
God, can you imagine the anxiety? And so to have a person to accompany you to do these things when you are not thinking straight.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's one way of, supporting the other thinking style that was not, Yeah,
the only thing that remains is, I wonder how you would put it to practice and figure out how you can support people, like on a more continuous basis, I guess. That's the only thing that's left.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure I understand the question though.
No worries. So you've laid out how to figure out the thinking styles in whatever service or whatever piece of the puzzle your organization fits in. Mm-hmm. So then you've defined the thinking styles. But on a more continuous basis, you would want to support those, right? Help people reach whatever goal they have. Mm-hmm. How would you do that more continuously, I guess? And how would you measure if it was successful or not?
Yeah. So remember, I was talking about kind of putting your arms around a couple of towers. When you're done with that one, you might be moving to another one, but some other team, or maybe you are a one-person team, You're measuring, you're doing some evaluative studies framed by the same purpose, that set of towers, right? It is a sub-purpose. And you're doing some evaluative studies while recruiting specifically. So all your recruiting is now going to be bounded by thinking styles. And you're going to want to recruit the thinking styles that you want to hear from.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this, when you first do a study in the problem space, you don't know what the thinking styles are.
Exactly. You're exploring.
Yeah. So you kind of use some guesses to try to get there. But recruiting is very different with this. You don't just, recruit random people. You also don't just recruit your own customers. Okay, there's a rule about not recruiting more than 50% of any study that are your own customers. What you're doing is you're recruiting by purpose and by thinking style. Right? And so then, you'll get a measurement of what you did while you've moved on to another thing. And that measurement might be glorious. And so you can focus on this other thing, or it might be not so great and you need to come back. And, a year and a half later, you've gone through a couple of these and you come back to this because you're like, you know what? This idea that we've come up with, that we've been discussing, I think it's time for us to maybe roll it out. And it'll push. I've got these help harm graphs that correspond to the towers. And it'll just push that measurement up out of harm into help.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, so in harm, we've got the mild harm, we've got the serious harm, we've got severe harm, and we've got systemic harm.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've measured those things, we've benchmarked them. On the help level, we've got weak help and we've got strong help.
Nice.
And then the little markers that you try to move up are thinking styles.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, with respect to the thing the little thing that you're using. So it's a thinking style connected with the tiny part of what you're building to make it better. So we're not measuring like the whole thing. We're measuring this part of what a person's trying to get done.
Exactly, that you've targeted towards the purpose in combination with their thinking style.
So if let's go back to the airline, if you're targeting just trying to deal with a delay getting to the airport, getting to the gate, right? Yeah. How are you going to support that for the thinking style of use my time wisely? How are you going to support that for the thinking style of in my bubble? Yeah. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Currently, I don't think there is any support for that.
It's something to work on, I guess.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a lot to I think I really need to re-listen to this episode. There was a lot packed in with regards to information, but I love the way it took kind of defining the different thinking styles or how you can find them even, because you really start with kind of an exploration, I guess. Once you've defined them, laying out your landscape, focusing on whatever you want to focus on, and then measuring how much your impact is, right? Did you move more towards harm? Because that was the wrong way.
That's the wrong way.
You want to move towards help.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I love it. Is there anything that's still missing, you think?
Oh, in the beginning, you and I did a little chat, and I'm all like, we can't fit this into an hour. Each of the courses that I teach is about 11 hours, and I teach 6 of them.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so if you want to get into details, there's a ton of details because there's a lot of questions about how, but there's one course in particular. You may not want to take the course on how to do thinking styles until you take the course on what is an opportunity map and how do you use it. Yeah.
Exactly. We didn't get into that at all.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I'm doing right now is trying to make my materials more different channels for different thinking styles. So I've done that with the Listening Deeply course. And I have also put out a book about it, which is coming out, like I said, real soon. And the idea is that I'm going through each one of the courses and I'm sort of updating it, upgrading it. Right now, the recordings are just recordings of live group meetings where I do lecture and we do exercises. But in future, like the Listening Deeply one is ready, and it's got 46 videos and quizzes and downloadable materials and all this kind of stuff. So that it is much more it's small bite size. You can deal with it, put it into your day. But it's also, we did proper closed captions. All of the PDFs that we created are accessible PDFs.
Nice.
In the videos, I had in mind that people are not looking at the screen. So I describe what's going on.
Yeah.
The imagery is a great sort of secondary to it, but I'm describing diagrams. I'm describing what's going on so that you don't have to look at the screen. You can listen to these things while you're vacuuming or you know, whatever else
makes sense.
You can do without paying too much attention to.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Indi Young, everyone. I'm going to put all her links to her socials as well as her website in the description below. So check her out. And thanks for coming on again, Indi.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you like the episode and want to support the show, don't forget to leave a rating. Better yet, share the episode with a friend. Let us know in the comment section below what you want to hear, and we'll make it happen. Cheers.